Joli, so great to have you. Welcome to the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. It is an honor to have you among us today. And for all of you that are not familiar with Dr. Hamilton, let me just make a brief introduction about the remarkable life that this woman has created for herself. You're a research psychologist, a TEDx speaker, you are a best-selling author, and you're a certified AASET sex educator and a serial entrepreneur. And today we are here to speak about one of the many publications that you have, and that is the Project Relationship, the Entrepreneurial Action Plan for Passionate, Sustainable Love. Welcome to the summit. So great to have you among us.
Thank you so much for having me, Claudia. I was thrilled to connect with you because I'm so passionate about how great relationships can be for entrepreneurs if they take the time to remember that they can have that.
Well, and that is so remarkable, right? So as you know, the audience for this summit are people that have pivoted into entrepreneurship as a result of the pandemic. And for this past year and a half, maybe they had a side hustle that they decided to finally make it, a full-time, or, they lost their jobs and here we are starting our own business. And it's so interesting, the topic we're speaking about today, because we traditionally jump into entrepreneurship because we want more freedom, because we want the time with our families. And then somewhere along the lines, we lose track of what happened and we are stuck. And so your book, it's a remarkable piece of work for any of us that find ourselves in that situation. So tell us a little bit about how you came up with this book and how do we find ourselves here?
Yeah. So, well, those are actually one and the same. The answer is the same. I wrote this book because I found myself upside down in my purpose, like why I got into entrepreneurship. Well, I was called to it. I knew I had a purpose. I had a reason, and I'm not really suited to work for other people anyways. But I have 7 children. I wanted time for those kids, and I wanted my relationship to thrive. I had a first husband who I made all the mistakes with, and who I thank deeply for being a wonderful learning experience for me. And when I was on my second marriage, I realized that I was digging myself the same hole. There was lots of good intention, and this is what I see in my clients, lots of good intention. And yet I wasn't showing up fully with the relationship skills that I did have. I had them from work. There was evidence. People showed up specifically to work with me because they knew that I could communicate and I could take risks and I could tolerate the ambiguity of doing big projects. So where was that at home? Why wasn't I bringing it home? And when I realized that, I set off on quite the adventure, really, to educate myself fully into how I could have those relationship skills and really bring them to bear on my love life. And I wound up with a very perfect for me relationship that has built-in tools that allow us to go out into the world, make the changes we want to see, be big, and then come back and be generative and passionate and connected. That's what I want to share with everyone.
I mean, that is what is so remarkable, right? Like traditionally, when you think about how to solve relationship issues, they tend to be kind of like a separation between your work life and your love life, if you will. What is remarkable about your book is that you created this in the language and in the format that speaks to entrepreneurs. So we immediately are kind of like, oh yeah, this speaks to me. But I wonder if you could take us to the beginning. So, we, as I say from the beginning, we jump into our business. We're so eager to, before we know it, we're like up to our necks in lack of freedom or time because we are so focused in our business. So how do we start by digging ourselves out of this issue once we realize that, okay, we created a problem for our family, partners?
Yes. I realized that I had created a problem in a way that really everyone who comes into my office shares a similar story. There's a moment where we hit Absolutely, the threshold. Like that's it. We've hit our limit. We're so frustrated with how overfull and how lack of free we feel, like how much of
Mhm.
that we start sort of exploding or
Mhm.
avoiding,
Mhm.
depending on our tendencies,
Mhm.
our partner, the person who we love the most, the person we want to connect to. And so what I wanted to do was explain that when it comes to business, we know that no one else is going to fix that for us.
Mhm.
If you hit
Mhm.
a roadblock at work, if I'm, for instance, I was running a CrossFit gym and I hit a threshold where I could not grow any further. I literally couldn't schedule any more classes into the time, right? Very straightforward problem. I called in a few coaches who were helping me grow my own business. We problem solved it. We decided how much money could be invested to make that problem be solved. And we solved it. That
Mhm.
problem was solved in a week and a half. And it felt enormous.
Mhm.
But when I hit that threshold with my husband, I didn't think, hey, who should I turn to help me solve this problem? What tools should I be applying? And instead, I just kept using that same hammer, like we are so, ingrained in us to try to solve the problems between us.
Mhm.
And I kept trying to get him to change in
Mhm.
order for me to feel different.
Mhm.
It just doesn't work,
Mhm.
unfortunately. We can even be pointing at a real problem going on with our partner, but asking someone else to change so that we don't have to,
Mhm.
it's just not an effective strategy. We know that in business.
Uh-huh.
We would never ask our customer to change
Mhm.
rather
Mhm.
than us to make a change. So I approach an action plan for having a better relationship from that perspective. You are part of a system. If you make a change, the system changes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Simple as that.
I mean, mind blowing, right? Because yes, it makes me think like we take care of our customers like they're babies. They're like so fragile. We will do anything for our customers to ensure that our business keeps on growing. Yet for us, yes, it's like a complete barrier. Like, how can we not mentally connect? And it wasn't until I got your book that I was like, oh my God, this woman is saying exactly what we should be doing. Uh, and you speak, it's very interesting because you actually take us through the process and you take us through the system. But you start by telling us that we also should be very thoughtful about identifying wants and needs. And to me, that was kind of like, what? How do you know what is a want and what is a need?
Yeah. So when I first was trying to work with people, so I am a research psychologist, and my
Mhm.
my area of interest is jealousy. That's my
Mhm.
primary academic interest, right? One of the things that comes up in jealousy research, and it's what tipped me off to this, is that people think that the things that they want are the same as the things that they need. And if
Yes.
we start teasing that apart and we realize that in fact, everybody's going to have deal breakers. These
Mhm.
are things that you are not willing to negotiate about. You actively need them versus all the things we want, all the wants that we have, the desires that we want to lean into. And if we tease those two things apart, often we can find that there's a lot of middle ground to create a relationship that works for our partner and for us. But as long as we say all of my wants and my needs are the same, well, now our partner basically has this long laundry list of like, oh my gosh, I have to fulfill all of that.
Mhm.
It also puts just too much pressure on our life. Most of us won't have most of our wants met all at once, right?
Mhm.
That's something you're going to get over the course of a lifetime. We can't, well, you can't have time freedom and be flitting about from every desire.
Yeah.
We have to exercise discernment. So I ask people to tune into their body, to really turn back to learning how to check in with what do I actually need in this situation. And a lot of us, if we're running a business where we're output, output, output all day long, and then we come home and probably we have kids to deal with too. So there's more output we need to do. By the time we get to our partners, we want them to input,
Mhm.
but they
Mhm.
probably had a similar day, right? They're
Mhm.
another adult having their day,
Mhm.
whether they're working or not, doesn't even matter. They had a similar experience of output, output. And so when we learn how to deepen our awareness of what our body tells us, this is what I need. Do I need a little more space? Do I need a little more connection? Do I need a few more words? Do I need more physical touch? If I can get in touch with those really core needs, then I can make a much simpler request for how we can just tune up our marriage, tune it up. It's not about like slash and burn and start all over again, though I've done that too. Sometimes it's necessary.
Yes, I think we can all relate to that. But that speaks really about our ability to create a communication pattern or a new way actually to communicate, because whatever we are doing right now is not exactly yielding the results that we're seeking. So how do you go about creating that safe space to one say, listen, we gotta do something? Obviously it's no news if you're in a relationship and it's tension, we're both aware of it, but how do you create that that time space, if you will, to step away from trying to kill each other to now say, let's just take a step back and refrain our communication?
Yeah. So I ask people to put a very simple practice into any crucial conversation that they're going to have. If you are about to have a what amounts to, remember, these conversations with our spouses, they can be life changing. So these are crucial conversations. So before you're going to have one, first get clear on what is it that you even want. Because if all you're doing is going to come together to complain to each other or to complain at one partner, like if it's just unidirectional, there's very little positive outcome that can come from that. And usually all we're doing is acting out what we saw our parents or caregivers do.
Yeah.
Think about how well did that work? Most of us had a not so awesome example and we just do it again. So I ask people to put this very simple practice in, which is get clear on what you want out of the conversation, which is at root connection, right? You could put it a million ways, but at root, you want to feel seen, right? You want to feel heard. You want to feel connected to your partner. So aim at that feeling, the feeling of connection, rather than aiming at a specific outcome, like a specific, I need this answer, or I need you to do this specific thing. Aim at a feeling. The second piece is HALT. HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. When you're going to have a crucial conversation with your partner, set up for success by checking, are either of you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and address that first. Just implementing that into your practices can change everything.
It is so interesting. As I hear you speak, of course, we will do that for our business, right? This is why your book is so remarkable, because if we approach it from the mindset of an entrepreneur, we can walk ourselves into the situation. We wouldn't be afraid to get in touch with a customer that it's a difficult customer. We'll find a way to communicate. And you're suggesting that we can actually do the same level of respect and love and attention to our own family that takes care of us. But it's interesting because sometimes we I don't know if lazy is the right description, but we undervalue the role that our partner could play in our relationship. You mentioned in your book this safety, that is a good idea to create a safety plan. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the idea behind this comes out of the kink community, the BDSM community, right? It's but that community of people who play sort of at the edges of sexual and sensual pleasure, right? But it's right at the edge. They have to take seriously the fact that what they're doing, the way they're connecting with their partners, is edgy. So they need to have a safety plan. I simply took that idea and said, where can I put this to work in the rest of my life? And there are two things that I can do. One is we can have a safe word that stops an argument, simply creates a pause and says, okay, wait, we're out past our safe zone. Let's pause and regroup. And my safe word is marmalade. My husband knows if I say marmalade, we just need to pause. I need to get back into my body because I am currently occupying probably my father's voice. and that's not going to work. So first thing is agree on a safe word that just pauses an argument and lets you both take a minute. We actually have an agreed upon time. I usually suggest people agree upon at least a 1 minute pause but up to 30 minutes. If a 30-minute pause, if you're a slower processor, you might need a 30-minute pause. The key here, the pause has to have an end time, because just being able to stop something isn't enough. What we need is to be able to press that pause and then re-engage with our full capacity to relate back on board. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we can do is think about aftercare. When we are in our relationships, so frequently we think about the way it feels to have these scary conversations, and we forget how wonderful it feels after we have braved the scary conversation. Mm-hmm. So I think about, okay, after we have one of these tough conversations, no matter what the outcome, how can we have a nice coming back together? Mm-hmm. And for some people, that means that they go out and they have a drink together. They actually take themselves out on a little, like, yeah, look at us, we did this thing. For some people, they go on a walk. For some people, they hop into bed. It's totally up to you, but there's like a process. We did the hard thing. Look at us. We celebrate that win. It changes everything, because now the crucial conversation, it's kind of like putting your reward after that. You know, it's so nourishing and it feels so good, and you can celebrate together.
I mean, it's actually right. I think about so many, as I was preparing for this conversation, and just as I reached out to you, I was thinking and reevaluating how I personally approach so many conversations with my husband. And I'm not unique, right? There's every single entrepreneur goes probably through the very same situation between children, household, and your business, etc. It just very quickly could take you so far away. One of the things that I found very interesting in your book was the importance of developing self-awareness. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, like, how do we do that, and how do we make sure that we are not creating some, imaginary person and not really becoming self-aware?
Oh God, this might be the whole enchilada. If people could walk away hearing just one thing, I would say this: everyone thinks they're self-aware. Everyone thinks they're self-aware. Mm-hmm. And yet the studies show us that less than 15% of us are even somewhat self-aware less than 10% of the time. It's a vanishingly yes. low number, right? So I don't suggest that you start thinking of yourself as not self-aware so much as just bringing yourself into the curiosity of, you know what, I probably don't know all of my motivations right now. I probably need to do some self-reflection. Staying with that curiosity lets you be at your growing edge. If you were to think of yourself as self-aware in sort of a complete way, in a finished way, as most of us do, I certainly fall into that trap too, especially if I'm having a big argument or and I feel defended, right? If I fill up that space and I'm all sure, so sure that I know myself, my motivations, my wants, my needs, there is actually no space for me to be growing and changing. If I let that go and remember that self-awareness is a process. Self-awareness is a process. It is not a finished thing. Stay with the curiosity of who you are, who you're becoming, who your partner is, and who they're becoming. And now you have two trees growing alongside of each other, right? On a growth journey. Always becoming, which means anything's possible.
That is so powerful. And as I hear you speak, I could almost picture myself and my husband, and I'm sure listeners could do the same, walking through those steps. But I'm going to take you back a little bit into a question, because, depending on where you are in the situation with your partner, you may be at a point where you're not speaking to each other, or you may be roommates instead of lovers any longer. So I know you gave us a way to think about it, and kind of like step back and check with each other. But I wonder, what do we do if we are at a point where we literally have like become roommates, or are more strange to each other than what we want to admit?
Yeah. This is a tender question because in order to simply face that reality is it often brings up big feelings of worthlessness. They're like it's attached to our self-concept. So in order to simply admit that we're living like roommates and that's not what we intended, it's one thing to have a sexless marriage that everybody's happy with is fine. But a non-intimate connection where we're literally just ships passing in the night, and or perhaps the only connection is our children and nothing else, just allowing yourself to see that is very tender. I would say that when you're in that spot, it's actually a wonderful time to go do individual counseling. Often people rush to trying to force their partner to go to counseling with them. And that forced situation often it just creates another thing to argue over and a way that to point blame, like one wants to go, one doesn't. So while I think couples work is wonderful, and if you're both on board and you get to that spot of awareness around the same time and you can get there, go for it. Do not hesitate, go. But getting yourself in a situation where you can start reflecting on your half of the equation. So in counseling or working with a coach, or simply working through a book like mine, or there are others, working through a book that lets you take the steps to really reflect deeply on how am I showing up in this relationship? When we point our finger out and ask our partner to change, we disempower ourselves from actually becoming happier. I say, let's go inside first and see what it is that we're doing. Are we showing up in a way that makes us happy about ourselves? If I'm not doing that, no amount of conversations are actually going to get us there.
That is so powerful because, I think about it, as I mentioned at the beginning, while this conversation is really for entrepreneurs, the truth of the matter is when you think about the entrepreneur today, it's not necessarily that 20-year-old young person who, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are young, are, starting their life that way. But the pandemic, has forced families to think differently. And there's already a charge of emotion because we're navigating this pandemic. And now we are trying to rebuild our life. And maybe we have kids that are leaving for college or, whatever the situation of the family might be. And it is an additional layer that it kind of like could create even a deeper barrier between ourselves and our partner because it's just another distraction, right? Instead,
there's someplace to
addressing.
Yeah, there is someplace to hide. Owning my own business has meant that I've always had someplace to hide when I wanted to. Coming to terms with that meant actually replacing, where is my purpose? I feel deeply called to my work. Like the work I do is absolutely a soul calling. And yet I also have a purpose to my relationship. I teach each of my clients to find the purpose, to find their purpose in their relationship. Why is this relationship in existence? And you brought up something really interesting. So many entrepreneurs hit that spot where their business is growing and probably thriving even, and their kids are mature enough now to not need their attention all the time. In fact, they're kind of shooing mom and dad away a little bit, right? Like, please, I have a little space. I'm in that phase. My kids are 14 to 21. I'm there.
Oh, okay.
and when you hit that spot, business becomes the convenient one. Oh, I can't hide behind the kids anymore. I'll go hide and work. But if you have a shared purpose for your relationship, then there is something to turn to that leads you to something greater. And I find it actually, this is like, it's one of those places where putting energy into one makes the other better. Being better in my marriage makes my business run better. Being better at business makes my marriage run better. These are not mutually exclusive. They actually support each other. And I have to remember to spend my time wisely and spend my energy wisely.
I mean, you're speaking about really taking ownership of our voice, right? So it's interesting because while there's entrepreneurs of all sizes and shapes and whatever, I find that for women sometimes it's difficult to speak in their own voice, and these they could be very strong, successful entrepreneurs, but yet somehow along the lines it's difficult to own your voice. in your marriage. And this, your advice speaks to that importance.
Yeah. Finding your voice in your most intimate relationships. And I would count among that your partner, your parents and children, and then any chosen family. So you're going to have a small circle. It's not likely to have a zillion people in it, but finding a way to actively use your voice in each of those places, there's always going to be some feels like a block. Like how could I use my whole voice in this situation? When I turn to my partner, what is the block between me and really totally voicing my whole self? And one of the blocks that comes up most frequently for my clients is that they have this imagination of who their partner wants them to be. And and so they're for a long time they've been that, and then they find themselves growing and changing, which is exactly what you were put on this earth to do. And so you have to keep making yourself visible to your partner. By holding your voice back, you're actually robbing your partner of the chance to grow alongside you. I know it's uncomfortable. I know people face a lot of internal critics, inner critic coming up and trying to keep them quiet. And yet this is being loved, is being seen. If you want to be seen and known, then we have to be willing to use our voice as well as our physical presence. Gear up. It's not the easiest part of marriage, but it is absolutely where we create like aspirational level connection.
As I hear you speak, I totally get it. How if we are better in our business, we will be better in our marriage, because we will go out of our way to have a clear communication with our clients, to build our business, to constantly think about like, what's next? What is my next growing level? And we just need to do the same for our relationships. So we are quickly approaching the end of our time together. But before we let you go, I wanted to ask you two questions. One, while we wait for your book to be delivered, the link for your book, it's right below this video. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to jump right in, and we can see it in the back of you, which is so exciting. What are three things that we can do right away today to kind of like start walking ourselves back from challenging relationship, if you will, with our partners or families?
Yeah. The first thing that you can do is to take a deep breath and get back into now. Get back into now. Most of the time when we think about our partnerships, we are living out in some imagined future that is not actively helpful. So while we are going to make an action plan for change, I want people to first just get present in your body now, and then allow yourself to feel the reality of your relationship. This is just one thing, but honestly, if you did just this one thing, what is the reality of your relationship? And now ask yourself, if this were my best friend, what would I tell them to do? If it weren't me, if it were my best friend, what would I tell them to do? And usually the answer is going to be get vulnerable. It's time. We're wasting time. So rather than 3 steps, I would leave them with simply that. Open yourself to the possibility of change. There are a million step-by-step things, but if you can open up that space, from there, you have the capacity to create any relationship you want. But as long as you imagine a fixed future, that's going to be impossible. Your relationship can only be as good as you can imagine your relationship to be. So let's make space for it.
So powerful, so powerful. You have given us so many gifts today to turn around and excel again in our relationship. And the roadmap that you create in your book, the action plan that you have developed for us, it's so powerful. Joli, Dr. Hamilton, where can we stay in touch with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, I'd love for people to hop on over to my website, which is just my name, jolihamilton.com, Joli, Hamilton, like the musical, nice and easy. And if they do, you'll find there's a free gift there called the Curiosity Date. I would love for people to download it. It is absolutely it's just the best 90 minutes you're going to spend with your partner. If you've been feeling disconnected, it's a chance to stop talking about work, stop talking about the kids, and actually treat your partner like the unfolding mystery that they are. So I would love for people to
Oh
grab
my
that.
God.
And you can
Absolutely.
always follow me on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Joli_Hamilton.
So I will list, we'll add the connections for your social media so people can actually follow you through. And we are so grateful for your time today. I know that we are all living with a clear section, a series of action steps that we can take. And thank you again for your generosity in your participation in this summit.
Thanks for having me, Claudia.